It's the middle of winter in Seoul, and the temperature has dropped to minus 26 degrees. Then a massive earthquake hits the city. Roads split apart, buildings fall over. In about a minute and a half, almost everything in the city is destroyed, and the whole place turns into a field of broken concrete. When the dust clears, there's one building still standing, an old apartment complex called Hwang Gung Apartments. Everything around it is rubble, and this place doesn't even have a crack in it. The movie is Concrete Utopia. A man named Min Sung wakes up inside his apartment with blood on his head. He's a civil servant, and his wife, Myung-hwa, is a nurse. They go down to the lobby and find all their neighbors standing around with the building manual, trying to figure out how to start the generator. There's no power, no water, no heat, and no phones. The police and the fire department aren't answering. Nobody is coming to help them. That evening, survivors start showing up. They come from all the collapsed buildings nearby, walking toward the only place that still has walls, and they start knocking on doors asking for somewhere to stay. A woman with a small boy knocks on Min Sung's door. She tells him he's the only person who opened, and she offers to pay him. Min Sung isn't sure what to do, but Myung-hwa lets them in straight away. Most of the other residents don't open their doors at all. They look through the peephole at a woman holding a child in the snow, and they wait until she gives up and moves on to the next apartment. And that's the thing about this movie. Nobody in that hallway thinks they're the bad guy. They're cold and scared and doing math on how long their rice is going to last. Over the next few days, the building fills up with strangers. Money is worthless now, so people trade instead. Min Sung swaps his watch for one can of food. Then a resident comes home and finds an outsider living in his apartment. He tries to throw the guy out, so the outsider stabs him and sets the place on fire. The hallway fills with smoke. About 50 people stand there watching it burn, and none of them move, because nobody knows whose job this is anymore. Then one man grabs a fire extinguisher and walks into the smoke by himself. He puts it out and comes back coughing and burned. His name is Kim Young-tak, apartment 902. Remember him. That night, the residents have a meeting, and honestly, it's one of the more unsettling scenes in the film, because nothing bad actually happens in it. They just talk. They agree they need a system, and someone in charge to make decisions. Then the head of the Women's Association speaks up. Her name is Kyum-a, and she's loud and friendly and completely ruthless. She says they need a man who would throw himself into a fire for them. Everybody looks at Young-tak. He gets elected delegate, and not one person votes against it. Somebody asks what his job used to be. Nobody answers, and nobody asks again. Then they vote on what to do about the outsiders. Every resident gets 2 stones from a board game, one black and one white. White means the outsiders have to go, black means they can stay. They drop their stone in a box privately, so nobody knows who picked what. White wins. The next morning, Kyum-a goes around the building telling the outsiders to come downstairs, because empty apartments are being handed out. She tells them to hurry up or the good ones will be taken. They believe her. They line up outside in the cold, and some of them look excited. Then Young-tak comes out with the residents behind him and announces that everyone who doesn't live here has to leave. A politician in the crowd starts arguing about their rights, and the residents come down the stairs with pipes and hammers and golf clubs. It turns into a completely one-sided fight. People start throwing things off the balconies at the crowd below. Young-tak takes an iron bar to the face, and when he stands back up with blood all over him, the residents lose it completely. They chase the families out into the snow, and while they're doing it, they're chanting. The apartment belongs to the residents. And then here's the part I wasn't expecting. Life inside the building actually gets good. They fix the heating, they organize work shifts, they send teams out into the ruins to find food. They put a list of rules up in the lobby. Min Sung gets put in charge of security because he's the kind of man who follows rules. And now the rules say, guard the gate. Food gets handed out based on how much you contribute. Go out into the ruins and risk your life, and you eat well. Stay behind because you're old or sick or a kid, and you get less. It sounds fair when they say it out loud, and it quietly turns the weakest people in the building into a problem everybody can see. Outside, the survivors are starving in the dark, watching the only warm building in the city. Inside, the residents have started calling them cockroaches. The search parties push further out. At a supermarket, a man with a shotgun grabs Kyum-a's son, Ji-hyuk, and holds him hostage. Min Sung tackles him, and Young-tak beats the guy half to death on the floor. They come home that night with food, medicine, and a dog. So the building throws a party. Everyone crowds into one room, drinking and laughing and eating meat that is almost definitely that dog. Young-tak gets up with the microphone and sings an old Korean pop song called Apartment, about crossing a bridge under the stars with your apartment waiting for you at home. Everyone sings along. It's the happiest they've been since the earthquake, and it's genuinely a fun scene, which is exactly what makes it so uncomfortable, because you know who's outside. That same night, a girl comes back. Her name is Haewon, and she used to live in apartment 903, right next door to Young-tak. She was outside when the earthquake hit. She survived out there on her own, and she's walked all the way home. The residents welcome her like family. Then she looks across the room at the man everybody calls Kim Young-tak, and she's never seen him before in her life. Now the movie takes us back to the day of the earthquake. There's a taxi parked outside Hwang Gung Apartments, and on the dashboard there's a taxi license with a photo on it. The name on it is Mo Se-beom. A few months before the earthquake, this taxi driver handed over his entire life savings for an apartment in this building. Cheap, quick sale, no proper paperwork. It was a scam, and the man who took the money was the real Kim Young-tak, who actually owns apartment 902 and who just kept the cash and carried on living there. So Mo Se-beom shows up at his door wanting his money back. Kim Young-tak opens it and calls him an idiot for handing over cash without a contract. Take it to court, he says. Now get out of my house. And Mo Se-beom snaps. He kills him right there in the living room, next to the go board, while Kim Young-tak's elderly mother sits in the next room. She has dementia, and she doesn't understand what's happening. And then, the earthquake hits. When it stops, Mo Se-beom is standing in a dead man's apartment, inside the only building left in Seoul, and every record of who anybody is has just been buried under the rubble. So he decides to be Kim Young-tak. He hides the body in the kimchi refrigerator and tapes it shut. He looks after the old woman and lets everyone assume she's his mother. And when that fire breaks out in the hallway, he runs into it, because the last thing he needs is anyone asking questions about who he is. So the man leading the campaign to throw out everyone who doesn't belong here is the only person in the building who doesn't belong here. And now Hae-won is telling people she doesn't recognize him. He handles it the way he handles everything. He tracks down the young girl who vouched for him at the start and threatens her, and when that doesn't work, he kills her. But the building is already falling apart from the inside. There's a young guy named Do-gyun who's sick and who refused to join the security team from the very beginning. One night, the residents catch him hiding a group of outsiders in an empty apartment. One of them is the woman and the little boy Myung-hwa let in on the first night. So the next morning, they hold a trial in the courtyard. Not quietly either. Broad daylight, in front of everybody, with kids watching from the balconies. Young-tak stands in front of the crowd and asks them a question. If a cockroach crawls onto your kitchen table, is it family? Then they decide on a punishment. Somebody suggests 100 hits. Somebody else says 300 at least. They settle on 200. And in between the hits, the outsiders have to kneel and shout that they were wrong. One of the men lifts his head and says that however bad the world gets, there are things you should do and things you shouldn't. They keep beating him anyway. Do-gyun doesn't survive it. Afterwards, they burn his body in a barrel in the courtyard, and two residents stand next to the fire joking that it smells like roast fish. One of them asks why they even bother burning the bodies now, and the answer is that the bodies they used to dump outside kept disappearing. The outsiders were taking them and eating them. That one stopped me for a second. Everybody tells stories about the people inside this apartment complex eating other people, but the real cannibalism is happening outside, among the families they threw into the snow. They caused that, and they're standing around a fire, laughing about the smell. Later that same day, a pipe bursts in the parking garage, and clean water comes pouring out. Everyone comes sprinting and stands under it with their hands out, soaked and laughing and hugging each other. It's the last good moment any of them get, because that night, Hae-won tells Min-sung the truth. She met the real Kim Young-tak once, when a package went to the wrong door. He opened it, looked her up and down, and told her he didn't know such a pretty girl lived next to him. She says she remembers his face perfectly, and that isn't him. Meanwhile, the food is running out, less than a week left. The committee argues in circles until somebody finally turns to the delegate and asks him what he's actually going to do about it. He tells them to figure it out themselves, because that's their job. Then he stands up and says he has an idea. He takes the search party further out than they've ever gone, past the dried up riverbed, into parts of the city nobody's been to since the earthquake. His eyes are bloodshot and he clearly hasn't slept. The men behind him quietly joke that the delegate seems a bit off today. And they're right, they're just wrong about why. Out there, they find a food court, buried but intact, with months of supplies inside. They start pulling boxes out, laughing, and somebody says Kyum-ae is going to be so happy. Her son Ji-hyuk is right there with them, carrying food and grinning. Then the outsiders drop on them from above. It's an ambush, and it was always an ambush. The food was bait. And these aren't desperate strangers anymore. They're organized, and they came to hurt people. The fight is fast and ugly. The residents grab what they can and run. And when they stop running and count heads, Ji-hyuk isn't breathing. They carry him home. And Kyum-ae comes out of her apartment and sees her son. This is the woman who talked the entire building into electing a delegate, and who smiled and lied to lure those families into the courtyard so they could be driven out into the snow. She goes straight for Young-tak. She screams that he said he had an idea and asks if this was it, putting her son in danger and getting him killed. She calls him a murderer. They have to physically hold her back. And somebody still loyal to him shouts that she was happy enough eating the food her son died bringing home. And that's when the whole thing comes apart. The residents start screaming at each other in the courtyard. Somebody asks what the point of any of this even is. Somebody says it's all for the sake of the apartments. And somebody else tells them to open their eyes and look around at what's actually happening here. They're still shouting when Young-hwa walks into the middle of it, dragging a kimchi refrigerator behind her. She'd gone up to apartment 902. She talked to the old woman, who didn't know where her son was and just kept asking for food. She looked around a home with no photographs in it anywhere, because somebody had taken them all down. And she found a refrigerator taped shut. She opens it in front of the whole building. There's a body inside, a wallet, and an identification card with a photo on it. It's not the delegate's face. Then she holds up the list of rules he wrote himself and pinned up in the lobby. Apartments belong to residents. Only residents can live here. She tells him those are his own words. The courtyard goes completely silent, and then somebody says out loud what everyone's thinking. Is the delegate a cockroach? And he doesn't deny it. He doesn't run. He stands in front of 200 people who worshipped him and screams that he is Kim Young-tak. He says he gave his life to this building. He says he thought of all of them as family. He says he covered himself in filth so that none of them would have to. And then he says he may not be registered here, but that apartment is as good as his because he paid for it and a con man stole it from him. The city is gone. There's a body lying open behind him, and he's still arguing about who owns the flat. The crowd turns on him in about 4 seconds. The same people who elected him start calling him a cockroach. A widow screams at him to bring back her husband. Somebody shouts that they never should have thrown the outsiders out in the first place. Somebody else shouts that he's the one who made them do it. And nobody in that courtyard mentions that all of them voted, that every one of them held a stone. He didn't throw a single family out into the snow by himself. They drag him toward the gate. Hwang gets in the way, and he throws her off the side of the building. And while all of this is going on, while 200 people tear each other apart over a body in a fridge, nobody is watching the wall. The outsiders have been gathering out there all day. There are hundreds of them, every family this building ever turned away. The people from the collapsed towers, the ones sleeping in the rubble, the ones who've been watching these windows light up every night while their kids froze. They've had weeks out there with nothing, and they've had time to get organized. And they're done asking. They come over the wall, and listen to what they're actually shouting as they come through the gate. It isn't a battle cry. They're shouting that they're starving, and that they want food. That's the whole demand. The residents meet them with kitchen knives and pipes and one shotgun with almost nothing left in it, screaming at them to get out. And then the two crowds hit each other, and at that point you honestly can't tell them apart. There's nothing organized about any of it. It's people beating each other to death in stairwells over floor space. Somebody yells to block the back gate, and nobody blocks the back gate. The barricades they spent weeks building come down in about a minute. Then the outsiders start setting off homemade bombs inside the complex, and Hwang Gung Apartments finally starts to come apart. The one building in Seoul that survived an earthquake that flattened the entire city. Sections of stairwell drop away. The hallways fill with smoke and freezing air. The concrete starts coming down on top of everybody. Min Sung and Myung Hwa are running through it when he shoves her into a room and tells her to stay there until things quiet down. She asks him what he's going to do. He tells her he'll be fine. Then he goes back out into the hallway and takes a knife in the side, keeping 3 men away from that door. Young Tak comes out of the smoke in the middle of all this. Nobody's following him now. Nobody's chanting his name. Everyone left in that courtyard knows exactly what he is. A bomb lands near a group of residents, and he picks it up and throws it back. He saves them, and the blast takes him down. When the screaming dies down, he's on his hands and knees on the concrete, and he says he's going home to rest, and that he'll come back. Then he crawls 9 floors, up a collapsing stairwell, past dead bodies, through the smoke, all the way back to apartment 902. And when he gets there, 2 strangers are already inside, going through the cupboards, taking the food. They look down at the man dying in the doorway. One of them asks if that's the guy, and if he's dead. The other one looks at his feet and complains that he's wearing shoes indoors and getting dirt on their floor. That's the last thing anybody says to him. He dies right there, holding a photograph of a family that was never his. By the next morning, Hwang Gung Apartments is gone. It's just another pile of concrete, exactly like every other building in the city. Min Sung and Myung Hwa get out and shelter in a ruined church. He's bleeding badly, and they both know he isn't going to make it, but he doesn't talk about it. Instead, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a hair clip he found somewhere in the rubble and tells her to try it on. He tells her she looks pretty. He tells her he'll buy her a nicer one later. Then he apologizes to her. For everything. For all of it. And he tells her the one thing he knows he got right was marrying her. That whole scene is quiet and very short, and it's the part of this movie that stayed with me. In the morning, she wakes up and the sunlight is coming through the broken stained glass above them, spreading across the floor in colors, and she tells him it's beautiful. He doesn't answer. She buries him under a slab of concrete, and then she starts walking. A group of survivors finds her wandering and takes her back to where they're living. It's an apartment building lying on its side in the dirt, collapsed and half buried, and people are living inside it sideways. There are no gates and no walls, no security team, no rations committee, no list of rules in a lobby. Somebody hands her a rice ball and tells her to eat it while it's still warm. And Myung Hwa doesn't understand. She asks them if she's allowed to live here. A woman looks at her, confused by the question, and tells her that if she's alive, then she can live. Then one of them asks her about that other apartment complex, the one everybody's heard the stories about. He asks her carefully if it's true that the people in there caught and ate other people. And she sits there thinking about all of it. The stones in the box, the chanting, the fire, the beating in the courtyard, the refrigerator, her husband in that church. And she tells him no, they were just ordinary people. And that's the whole point. Nobody in that building woke up evil. There was a fire and a scared crowd and a vote taken in private so nobody had to say it out loud. And every single step after that felt reasonable to the people taking it. So here's my question, and I actually want an answer in the comments. You're in that room, the heating works, the food lasts a lot longer if there are fewer mouths, and somebody puts a stone in your hand. White means they go, black means they stay. Which one are you dropping in that box? Be honest. And if you want another group of completely ordinary people locked in a building making a series of very reasonable decisions, that one's already up on the channel. 80 office workers, sealed inside their own office and told to kill 30 of their coworkers. See you there.